Hey there everyone, and welcome to Bill's Retro Gaming Show. On today's video, I want to share something really special with you guys. This is actually the first video game console that I ever actually owned, and recently I was able to get one back again. We're going to dive into all of that, how I got this, and what's going on with it right after this. All right, everyone, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscription button. Click the notification bell if you want to be notified every time I put up a new video. Give this one a thumbs up and leave a comment below if you want to be part of the conversation. Well, as I alluded to in the beginning, I wanted to share something really special with you, and this is one of the first video game systems that I ever owned as a kid. This is the Colecovision. Now, the Colecovision was put out by Coleco in 1982. It came out as a response to Atari's huge success with the 2600 and became a direct competitor to Atari's next system, which was the 5200. Now, the Colecovision did have a lot of success in the United States for the couple of years that it ran, from 1982 till about 1984-85. After about 1985, it became a victim of the video game crash that took place in the United States. Now, part of that had to do with the overall crash that was going on, where people were becoming less interested in home video games at that particular time. And part of it had to do with Coleco's own interests changing to a computerized system that they called the Atom, which started out as an add-on for the Colecovision and then also became its own home computer system. I actually had one of those as a kid as well, and while I loved it and it was a great first computer for me, a lot of people didn't like it as much. There were a lot of troubles getting it to launch. Once it did launch, a lot of people had a lot of issues with them. Many of them got returned and all. And unfortunately, all of those issues helped to sink Coleco and Colecovision from going any further. But now I actually have one back. Now, how did this come to happen? Well, I'll tell you the story. And this is, first off, a huge shout out to a great friend of mine from high school by the name of Mark Korsak. Mark was actually, he lived up in the same area around me. Obviously, we went to high school together. He happened to be here recently at his mom's place, cleaning out some different things, going through some closets or whatever. And he found a bunch of old stuff sitting in the back of a closet, including his old Colecovision that had been sitting there for 30 plus years. Well, we kind of talked back and forth, and in talking, he offered to send it to me. Sight unseen, no idea if it worked or not. He actually did not have a power cord for it. He did not have the TV hookups for it. Did not know if it worked or anything. But he said, hey, if you can get it to work, enjoy. He knew, obviously he found out that I was doing this and some different things. So again, huge shout out to Mark. Thank you so much. If you're watching this, you'll get to see a little bit of what I've had to do to get this to work. And for the most part, it's working in really good condition, except for a couple of different things. Now, first off, one of the things I said was that it was missing a power cord. So I was able to find a power cord on eBay for 10 or 12 bucks, and I wound up picking one of those up. Now, it's the actual power cord that works with the Colecovision, and I have it hooked up to the TV. I should have brought it out over where I could show you guys, but it actually hooks to the back here, right here, and it goes to a huge brick that plugs into the wall. These old units use these huge power bricks. Now, you don't actually have to do that nowadays with something like this if you want to actually run it on a modern TV. You can actually go, there are several companies that make adapters, and one of them I believe is Stone Age Gamer. I have to double check that, but I will leave a link in the description to this video where you can actually buy an adapter and run this off of USB and just plugged it into a USB brick instead of having the huge power brick, which is actually a good thing because those power bricks have sometimes been known to fail, and if they have a power failure of some kind, it could cause feedback and mess up your system. So that's something that I'm actually going to look into getting for this at some point in the future as well. Now, the other thing I said that was missing from this was the hookups for the TV. Now, initially the hookups for the TV were a single cable, an RCA style cable that went to a junction box basically that you plugged into the back of your TV with a switch, so you could switch back and forth between TV and cable. Now, modern TVs don't really have those hookups nowadays, but you can actually hook this up very simple with a single RCA cable and a little adapter like this. Now, what this will do is the RCA cable will hook into the back of the system here, and then you plug the other end of the RC cable into something like this, and then this has the screw adapter on the end, and you would just screw it into the coax cable on the back of your TV. Then there's a little selector switch back here for channel 3 or channel 4. You just turn your TV to channel 3 or channel 4, whichever one you have, whichever one actually gives you the better signal, and away you go. Now, again, there are other adapters you can get to have this go into directly into RCA hookups on your TV, or even HDMI. There are mods you can do for this to be able to do that, or you can, like I said, you can get an adapter that actually will plug from this into a box, and then that box will do HDMI out. So there are a lot of different ways that you can hook up an old system like this to a modern TV if you want. Now, of course, the other option is to get yourself an old CRT and put that in. And I'm currently on the hunt for one so that I can do that, because quite frankly, I think these actually look better on an old CRT than they do on newer monitors. Now, when I first got this and I hooked it up, I did actually have some issues with it right away. The picture was a little fuzzy and things like that, but I was able to kind of fix that out by cleaning up the unit, by blowing some dust out from inside it and things like that. And for the most part, the picture looked fine, but the controllers have been having some issues. And after doing some look into them, I found out why. Well, one of the controllers right here actually has an issue where moving it to the right doesn't seem to work. So I'm still trying to figure that out a little bit, or maybe get a replacement controller for it. The other issue was with controller 1. Now, the controller itself works fine, but the port that it plugs into is actually an issue. And when I investigated, I figured out that it was actually missing a pin. Now, this is what these old controller ports actually look like. I was able to get one of these off of eBay for about $10, which quite frankly isn't a great price, but it was the best price I could find. And I don't know how well that is going to come across in the video, but this is the port that the controller hooks into. Actually, the Colecovision controllers use the same port style as the Atari 2600 and a few other systems out there. So they're very interchangeable. And then if you see these here, these actually connect to the motherboard of the unit and are actually soldered in place. Now, I will tell you one thing, I have no idea how to solder. It's something that I would love to learn to do, but it's not something I want to practice on something like this that I could screw up royally. Luckily, I have a good friend who's actually very good at that, and not only very good at that, but very knowledgeable about the Colecovision itself. And that is Glenn Planamento of GRS. Now, a lot of you who watch my videos, you know who Glenn is. You know him from his videos from his Thunderstick Studios, where he produces arcade quality controls. But he's a genius when it comes to this, and a huge shout out to him. He and I actually don't live that far from each other. We're about a half hour away from each other. So I did bring this to his place a few weeks back, and we inspected it. We looked it over. You know, he looked at a bunch of stuff on here to make sure everything was working as it should be. And for the most part, like I said, we were able to get it up and running really well, except for that port, which I had to get. Now that I have one, I'm going to have to get back to him and see if we can swap that out to get this to work 100%. Now, the good thing about the way that this is hooked up, the way I can play this now, is that when I plug the games in, I can actually use this controller here just to get the game to start, which is you push a number on the number pads here, and then play the game in a single player game with controller 1. For the most part, it actually works even with that missing pin. Some of the number pad don't work, but as long as I don't play any games that use the number pads for now, I'm good until I get this fixed. But I have to tell you, I'm really excited to own a Colecovision again, because like I said, it was it was actually the first real arcade home console system that I had. I had something prior to this called the Coleco Telstar, which was a Pong-based system. But this was the first real cartridge-based one that played arcade style games, and I really enjoyed it. Now, since I picked this up, I've also picked up something else that I'll show you in a second video that lets me play other games on this as well. But for now, I'm actually really excited just to have the Colecovision and to have a couple of games for it. Now, when my friend sent this to me, he did send me one game to go with it, and that was Donkey Kong Jr., which is a fantastic game and a lot of fun to play, very close to the arcade at the time for a home game system. Now, since then, I've picked up a couple of others, including the original Donkey Kong, which was the pack-in game that came with the Colecovision when it was first sold. I've also picked up Zaxxon. I know the label on this is really kind of messed up, but the game plays great. And another fun game. This is a shooting gallery game called Carnival. But that's a first look at the Colecovision itself and what I've had to do to get it restored, to get it in good working order. And like I said, for the most part, it works great. I think once I get that controller port taken care of, this should work 100%, except for some issues with this controller, which I'll actually ask Glenn to look at as well. Maybe there's something we can do to get it fully working. If not, I'll keep my eyes out for another controller and just replace it. But considering this was sent to me free, again, thank you very much, Mark. I really do appreciate that. It's working, it's working really well, and I'm really excited for it. So let me take just a minute here. I'm going to plug it in. I'm going to show it on the TV, and I'm just going to show off the games that I have real quick so you can see what some old Colecovision games actually look like. All right, so my apologies. I do not have a hookup for this to actually capture directly out of the Colecovision, so I've got my camera pointed directly at the TV, but we're going to start by looking at the pack-in game that originally came with it, and this is Donkey Kong. All right, and so while this game certainly isn't 100% arcade accurate, forgive me, I got to get used to these controls, it's been so long since I've played. At the time that this came out in 1982, this was about as arcade accurate as you could get. Most of the other ones that have come out for things like the 5200 and even the 7200 were definitely nowhere near as close to the arcade as this version was. And to be honest with you, it plays pretty good. Now, in the original arcade, there are 4 different stages. And in this version, there are only 3. This is missing the conveyor belt pie factory, whatever stage that was in the arcade. But it does have 3 of the stages, and they'll just repeat over and over again as you play. But yeah, as far as arcade conversions go, this was actually really good and really accurate for a home system at the time. Next up, we have one of my favorites, which is Donkey Kong Jr. And similar to Donkey Kong, it may not be 100% arcade accurate, but at the time it was the closest version you could get. Oh, that was a good one. I got 2 of them. Oh, I was expecting him to go down. But anyway, you get the idea. Now, again, this has, I believe this has all the stages from the arcade, but it is missing certain animations, such as once you get to the top there in the arcade version, Mario, or Jumpman as he was known at the time before he became Mario, would actually move the cage off the screen. And in this version, it doesn't do that. But again, other than that, it's about as arcade close as you could get at the time. And it's still, to this day, a lot of fun. Next up, we have Zaxxon from Sega. Now, this was always one of my favorite games playing back in the day. It takes a little getting used to. It's got this top-down isometric view to it, which was very unique for the time. And again, while a lot of these games weren't 100% arcade accurate, they were about as close as you could expect to get in a home arcade system. And this one in particular just plays great and is a lot of fun. One of the things I love about this game is that it has the fuel meter, and as you fly, the fuel will go down, but you can get more fuel by shooting fuel canisters, which is always a unique play mechanic. But yeah, definitely a fun game. And yes, the graphics in the arcade version are definitely a little better. It definitely plays a little smoother in the arcade than here. For a home conversion in 1982, this was just fantastic. All right, and last but not least, we're going to look at another Sega game. This is Carnival. And Carnival is really just a carnival shooting gallery. It may not look like much, but it's actually a lot of fun. And one of the games that I really, really enjoy. It's another arcade game, very close to the arcade. And as you can see, the little ducks, they come down, and if they reach the bottom, they will take some of your bullets. You're limited in bullets, and you have to get more by shooting and adding. And if you shoot the wrong thing, sometimes you will actually lose bullets. And you can even shoot the pipes up top. You can see those too. So yeah, you definitely want to be careful what you shoot at, but it is just a lot of fun. And there you have it. These are the games that I currently own for my Colecovision. And I gotta say, I'm having a lot of fun reliving my youth, come on, and playing these old games that I used to play as a kid when I owned my original Colecovision. Come on. All right, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank you. This has been a look at the Colecovision, the first console system that I owned as a kid, and I'm super happy to get one back in my possession. Thanks again to my good friend Mark Korsak for sending this out to me. I appreciate it. Hopefully you've watched this video and you can see how well it's working, even though we had to do a little bit to get it up and running. And again, thanks to Glenn Planamento for all of his help in getting it working to this point. I'm looking forward to getting back together with him so we can get that controller port fixed and just get it working that much better. Now, as I said, I did pick up something else to go along with the Colecovision. I'm going to show that to you guys in another video. But for those of you who are familiar with the history of Colecovision, especially their rivalry with Atari, you may have an idea of what it is I've picked up. But I'll save that for another one, all right? That's going to do it for this one, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscription button, and I'll see you on the next video. That's all for now. Have a great day.